If you had access to someone who has spent 35 years in the packaging space, buying and reselling, would that be of any value to you? Would you want to know how they've successfully sold and negotiated for the likes of Kraft Made, Kraft Foods, H.J. Heinz, Hershey's, Corning Glass, whether it's food, non-food, chemical, agricultural? The point is that there's hidden clues that have been left along the way that you can tap into. Check out today's video. Here we're going to interview somebody who spent 35 plus years doing this successfully and can help you. Check it out.
So I want to know who you are. Who is David Marinick?
Thank you. And I'm excited to talk with you too. Let me see. It's kind of an interesting question. I'm a 35-year veteran in the packaging space. Now, packaging, of course, is a very broad industry. You know, a lot of people think of brown boxes and bubble wrap, Kiana, but packaging is so much more. You've got equipment and a lot of technology pertaining to certain types of materials and films. But I'm a 35-year veteran, if you will, in the packaging space. Finding packaging, working with companies that use packaging, dealing with manufacturers that are trying to sell that packaging to certain industries, if you will. So it's really kind of a very loaded industry in the fact that there's not a clean cut, I do this. You know what I mean? I went to a school here in Ohio, Bowling Green, for undergrad. Not that I ever thought I'd be in the packaging space. I always thought I'd be in something more techie than that. My first job out of college, ironically, was selling steel. And I don't know how, but it was the first job I could get out of college. So I really didn't care. All I know is I needed to start somewhere. Again, this is back in the 80s. So when I got a job that paid me $19,200 a year, I thought I had just hit the lottery. And I mean, boy, I'm just going to roll in dough. And I wasn't even in Cleveland. I grew up in Pittsburgh. So I had to move from Pittsburgh to Cleveland in about 1 week. I was so desperate to kind of get started at a job. So I moved to Cleveland, worked there for probably about 6 months. And I don't know if you know and have worked with anything having to do with the steel business, but I thought packaging was boring. Steel is even worse, Kiana. It was just dreadful.
Steel to packaging.
Yeah, well, you know what?
Journey.
They're both very, very interesting industries. A lot of history back, a lot of manufacturing tied to it, but there was nothing really sexy in the whole steel industry either. You know, the company I worked for would basically take rolls of steel, and companies that would need a 12-inch piece or they would need a block of something to go in machine, I would sell it to them. And it was dreadful. It was that job that we all hate, that I was waiting for the phone to ring. This was pre-internet. There wasn't such a thing as an internet. And I literally was part of a bank of salespeople that waited for the phone to ring. And when the phone rang, I would go over and go to almost like a Bible-looking book and just flip through there and go, okay, he needs a type of steel. And then I would just calculate it on a calculator and hand it to the sales manager. It was just stupid. It was just really inefficient. Wow. So I was eliminated with a whole group of people. It wasn't like I did anything wrong, but companies like that, it's literally 6 months to the day after that job, they laid off about 20-some people in a different whatever. And I went to work at a national packaging company that really is, name of the company was Stephen Gould. And Stephen Gould didn't make any packaging whatsoever. They basically were brokers, national brokers. They would buy and resell packaging. And what was interesting to me was that it was purely commission. It was something that, you know, packaging just fits me in the fact that it's not, I don't know, there's nothing here, like I've said, and I'll keep saying, because I used to say it all the time, is there's nothing sexy in the packaging space. But it's interesting, it's needed, it's valuable, you know, the right opportunities are there. It can be lucrative. And so with Stephen Gould back in the 80s, I learned the hard way that it was that whatever I could sell, whatever I could, and again, pre-internet. So I would literally get in my car and drive around the surrounding area. I was living in Cleveland at the time, and I would drive around trying to find industrial parks that had a couple different companies. And I would go around and just knock on the door. And the difficult thing with knocking on the door at that point was, and this was way before the electronic key cards and all this kind of stuff, but I would knock on the door, walk into these places and see if I could talk to somebody about packaging. That's all I knew. Packaging. And again, I didn't know whether that, and people would say, what do you mean packaging? And you mean like bubble wrap? You mean like boxes? And anything, I was looking for anything. But long story short, I learned really fast that walking into any company, I don't care whether it was a small mom and pop place to the Hoover Company and vacuum cleaners, I wasn't going to get very far by dealing with walking in the door, because that's generally how commodity sales guys work. I knew after about a year or two that I needed to kind of really focus on finding pain points and problem areas at companies. Now, everybody was different. The beauty of working at Stephen Gould at the time was I wasn't limited to any particular type of packaging. So I, in turn, would be able to go to the Hoover Company and sell them necessarily packaging for vacuum cleaners, and then go to Moen Faucets and work with them on, everybody has a different, unique twist to what packaging they use. So anyhow, when I got into that space, I kind of really found my way in the fact that I was my own businessman. They were the mothership, if you will. They took 50% of the profit. So if I made $100, they took $50, but they were also the bank. And what was nice about that was if I got an order, then I didn't have to worry about taking it out of my pocket. They would become the bank, and so that's sort of the world that we were in. Stayed there for about 11 years and it really was one of those critical places of, I was making very, very good money, but I was also giving half away to the bank, so to speak. You know what I mean? So making $250,000 or $500,000, but knowing that I'm giving Stephen Gould the other $500,000, that's tough after a while. And I'm like, wait a minute, I should be able to do this myself. And that's sort of where people, and so long story short, I really fell in love with the packaging space because it fits me very well. Specialty packaging, especially, but really in essence, my background is and was and still remains trying to find pain points of companies regarding their packaging. Did that make any sense? It was a bit of a rabble. Does it? Okay.
No, that makes complete sense. And I feel like, as a consumer, a normal person like me who has nothing, no idea about packaging and, the history of it and how much we actually need it, but we really do. Like you said, it's really valuable.
Right.
And so with that, what you're trying to do now is you are creating multiple channels, just to get this information out, like YouTube. I'm trying to figure out who you are. We're doing this short little interview, but why? I know you mentioned, the value, but why is it important to everyone else? Or why should everyone know about it?
Yeah, and there's so many there's so many different ways to go with that, but let me try, if you will, because things have changed from that background that I gave you about getting into the space. But fast forward now from the mid 80s all the way now into 2024, and we have the internet. We have the ability to kind of be in multiple places through things like Zoom or Riverside or, Microsoft Teams or whatever. I was always an early adapter of technology. And the reason why was when I started my own business. So so long story short, I started my own business on my own. And that's a very difficult transition for anybody, not just financially, but you've got, my wife just became pregnant at that time. And then, all of a sudden things that I never expected. And there's all these kind of like, do I really want to do this? Oh my God, I just left a job that was making big money. And now but I really knew that if I could continue on focusing on particular niches in the packaging space, I could be successful, internet or not. So like I said, I was a big, early kind of, I saw the web or the internet as a way to be in multiple places at one time. And way before there was a Google, if you will, or there really wasn't, it was just the wild, wild west. Anybody in my space in the packaging business could literally get a website and put something up there, and people began to search for different types of packaging. Now, quickly with Google and some of the other search engines, they minimized how much you could really, kind of get out there and do. But I found that people loved going and using the web. I found that if I could take confusing and difficult topics of packaging, I don't want to say dumb it down, but make it very, like you had mentioned, look, a lot of consumers don't understand all the intricacies having to do with packaging. They don't know how it's made. They don't know how and now we've got all these hot topics with sustainability, eco-friendly. We'll get to that in a second. But basically there's so many different tentacles to packaging, and everybody has a different interest. So I was an early adapter into the technology piece, and it remains to this day. And what I find right now, to sort of answer your question, in 2024, the blocking and tackling, Kiana, is still the same. People need packaging. Companies need packaging to package their products. Companies need packaging to sell their products or contain the product or make it or keep it fresher for longer. Some companies need packaging to move it and store it and, merchandise it. So there's all these different things, but the packaging need is still the same. What I have found over the last 20, 25 years is our world has really changed. You and I have talked off camera before, and I'll try to sum this up. But in the 30-some years since I've been in this space, when I was a newbie getting out there knocking on doors, I would go into a company, and that decision maker at a company was usually the buyer. Now, back in the 80s and early 90s, that buyer, in every company, I don't care how big or small, they had a buyer, and sometimes two or three, depending on how big they were. But the buyer was the one that controlled everything. The buyer was the one that visited factories. The buyer was the ones that negotiated. The buyer was the one that made sure you got paid. The buyer was the one that knew how to ship it, all these other kind of things. Well, in the early 90s, you saw this, the world started to change where they said, we saw a lot of buyers getting let go. They were making a lot of money, and companies were saying, well, wait a minute, I've got 7 buyers here. They're all making $100,000 a year. No, they're buying stuff that we just, so we saw this shift over the last 20 years from the buyer perspective holding the cards to shifting it more towards like a computerized, automated. Yes, some companies have engineering departments when it comes to their packaging, but there was this big shift from having a buyer control and negotiate the whole transaction. Now it's some clerk. Now it's somebody that calls themselves a buyer but has no clue, because there's all this unique parts of packaging. But now we don't have anybody at a company that really understands it. I find that as a tremendous opportunity. Now, why, for me, and it's a hard way to sell, but it's something that I know that will bear fruit. It'll take a while, but since we've kind of eliminated the buyer mentality and the real part of selling packaging means every company is its own type of puzzle, for lack of a better way to put it. And I have to get into your company and figure out, okay, at Kiana's company, who is the decision maker for their packaging? And I go over to Bob's company, who is the decision? And it could be you, it could be Sally, it could be, you know what I mean? But step one is, how do you find that person? And then we have all of this technology when it comes to specialized packaging that has evolved over the last 30 years. Remember, I'm comparing this to back in the early 90s. We've got all this technology with packaging, not just from shipping and brown boxes, but the critical packaging that's used for cooking and storage and and then we go to, so that's step number 2. And then step number 3 is, how do you sell that stuff? So tie that all back to this really long drawn out answer to this, is that I find there are 3 main tentacles here that are really, really ripe in the packaging space. Number 1 is being able to find decision makers is part of the challenge for some people. Having the knowledge and technology or what makes a package or type of package better than another. And then the third tentacle is, how do you sell that? There's a gap between all of this. And you would think that, well, that just makes, you just sell it. There's a science behind all of this. So back to one of the original things you had mentioned was, there's all these multiple platforms now between the internet, YouTube, TikTok, ebooks, podcasts, all these kind of things. The reason why I'm so excited is because all of those platforms, you call them, all of those platforms are perfect for me to share my knowledge, to get it out there. Now, that doesn't mean somebody's going to come knocking on the door. That's part of the challenge that's out there. Some people do if you get it to the right person. But everybody now in this day and age of 2024 lives on their phone, lives on the web, that's where they search. That's where they look for answers. That's where they look for information. It's just such a wide open highway for somebody that wants, I think at heart, I'm a teacher. I think if somebody said, what do you do better than anybody else? I think I teach about packaging. Now, that doesn't mean it's, I can kind of, because it's not so high tech, it works for me. But I also can teach the intricacies of building a relationship, getting to know who the buyer is, being able to negotiate a sale to make sure that the customer is happy and also the sales rep makes money. All of this stuff, Kiana, is content, is information that I truly believe people need to hear. And I truly believe if they heard it properly, meaning this isn't being condemning or you're silly or whatever. No, this is about sharing the 35 years of what I've learned so somebody could actually run with that. Because I really, my favorite thing to do is have a young salesperson reach out to me and ask me about, can you help me get in the door at, Corning Glass? And part of all of this, and I'm sorry, I go off on these tangents, but thank you for listening to me.
No, you're fine.
When I go to, when somebody says, I want to sell Corning Glass or whoever it is, the first thing I ask is, where's the pain point? And that's something that has become my calling card for the last 20 years. Everybody that works for me just rolls their eyes, even my kids, because it's always like, I can always equate to, why are they looking? Or what's the pain point? Or why are you asking? There's something there that's causing somebody to either want to know, just like you had mentioned earlier, you're a consumer of packaging and your interest in packaging may be something tied to, I don't know, sustainability, you're in Hawaii, whatever it may be. Now, somebody else, it may be pure cost. Somebody else, it may be pure efficiency or damage or whatever. What I'm getting at is, where is the pain? So when a young rep asks me, how do I get into Corning Glass? It's asking, where's the pain point? And if they don't know, then they don't know. And what I'm saying is that I literally say, you got to go back and find pain. Because if somebody calls you and says, I need a quote on a bunch of bottles or glass, no, because our job isn't to quote stuff, Kiana. Our job is to sell stuff. And our job is to find, and our job, even more elaborate, is to solve pain points with the packaging that we sell. So my pushback to a sales rep is, where's the pain? And if they're not telling you pain, there's either two reasons for it. They're not the decision maker, meaning they don't know that there's pain. And number two, you got to get to that person. You know, there's so many companies, and again, it's a difficult transaction for a lot of young people who, again, live on their phone, and they're not very good at the old school, let me look at you in the eyes and say, I need help with something, right? And so it's such an interesting time because, you know, there's a need on both sides of this equation. There's that need for old school just communicating. And we don't do a very good job of that here in the US, meaning I do a lot of work globally. A lot of countries don't have a problem saying, Kiana, I forgot to place an order. I'm really behind on this. I'm in trouble. I need some help. But there's a lot of people here in the US, they'll never say that. They'll say everything but that because they're afraid of what I'll think of them. You know, I need this right away. Okay, why? I just do. No, that's not the answer. Or can you just get it for me right away? And part of that is this puzzle. Part of it is that puzzle. So I just think there is such a prime opportunity to be able to help in all three facets, help the end user in the packaging space, help the sales rep, obviously help the customer, help our environment, help the economy. There's all these things, but nobody really, Kiana, that's why I was excited when you reached out. Nobody really owns this communication back and forth about it. Does that make any sense? There's a lot of people, you know what I mean? There's, you go to LinkedIn and, you know, the interesting thing about packaging is that, you know, it's not like this is you go to TikTok and people post videos, whatever. And I mean, it's fun and it's, you know, this is a B2B type of sale. We're not B2C. I'm not looking to sell or build relationships with mom and pop popcorn companies, right? These are big established companies. And this is where this is a challenge because B2B guys may not necessarily be going to TikTok looking for informational, and they're not. Let's face it, they're not. However, because we're so connected with technology, they may be on TikTok for something at their lunch hour that pulls them into something that is, and look, to a piece of content that mentions sustainability, or a piece of content that mentions their company, or a piece of content that mentions their industry, like maybe they're a salesperson or their career, meaning a salesperson, and all of this stuff is this wide open blank canvas that I believe if somebody, and I'm determined to be part of this, but to be able to share information, share it in such a way that is digestible, that people can understand. And if it's done using the techniques, and I mean, using the channels, the techniques that people live on, meaning their phone, the YouTubes and the TikToks and the short videos or whatever, I think we're on to something. I really think people can consume that and then go, well, wait a minute, we use that packaging, or we have a problem with this. It's a bit of a stretch because remember, we're B2B, and that's where a lot of these companies in the packaging or those that use packaging, they're not used to going there. They want to go to a trade show, or they want to go and meet somebody at some conference somewhere. But those days are over. COVID has changed that. And I'm not saying there still aren't trade shows or good trade shows, but it's a lot of work.
Right.
I know you just came back from Vegas for a show, and it's just like me, to go to a show in Chicago or whatever, it's a big project. You can't just... Yeah. So I look at all of this as just part of that mix, if you will, to be able to share information about different types of packaging and then be able to sell it in such a way that the customer feels that I don't want to say got a good deal because it sounds like selling a car, but that they feel that they were, they were heard. And I see a lot of that that's happened, and I am so passionate about the sales process, meaning from both sides. I'm so passionate about, and you and I have both been around long enough. You know that when we talk to somebody, the feeling when they're not even paying attention. You and I go out, and if I'm spending my time looking at my phone, and you'd go like, wait a minute, I just met you for lunch and here you are. My point is that we've lost, which I think is an opportunity, but we've lost a lot of the connection that people need to have. And there's a confidence with doing that. There's a confidence by being able to look at somebody, whether it's a video or not, and literally say, I need some help, or what's the problem, or whatever. But then on the other side of this, I'm also fascinated with the sales side of things. I have seen so many mediocre salespeople that are afraid to ask just even basic questions. Why are you looking? Or what problem are you having? And it drives me crazy because they're leaving. At the end of the day, I told you from the very beginning, way back since we met, I'm a sales guy at heart. And to be able to sell to somebody effectively, it's a two-way transaction. You have to make the customer comfortable and feel like they were heard, their pain point. But if you don't get that, so that's back to my original, people are afraid to even ask those questions. But I see salespeople that just don't even understand that you may not be interested in the cheapest price. You may have a real pain point, like you're not getting your product, or your existing order from some other company never showed up. So many of these guys and gals from both sides just cannot do it. So it's a passion of mine to be able to just sort of like, it's almost like communication 101. Sorry, I digress, but go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, totally. Just listening to you, I feel inspired because I feel like there's a disconnect, like you mentioned. And when you mentioned that you are a teacher at heart, that's something that stuck out to me. You mentioned that you are a teacher at heart. And I truly believe that because I can hear your passion behind everything that you're talking about when it comes to packaging. And I think that's where there's a lack of. Not everyone is a teacher, or not everyone is so passionate about the product that they may be selling. And so with you, as you say you are a teacher at heart, you have so much knowledge from all the many years that you have been in the packaging world. I think that's what a consumer wants. And I think that's where there's the disconnect, because you have your normal, salesperson that just wants to sell you something. And I feel like anybody can be a salesperson. They can memorize a script. They can go out, do cold calls, talk to someone and try to sway them into purchasing something. But when you feel like you can trust the person, like with just talking to you, I feel like I can trust you with my whole life when it comes to packaging. I'm like, here.
I appreciate it.
And that's what I feel like people need to know, is that you are not only so knowledgeable in packaging, but you are a teacher. And that's where people need to realize that, the basics, communication 101.
100%.
And with whatever we're doing right now and what you're trying to get out to the world about packaging is amazing, honestly. And I think a lot of people need to know what you have in store, which coincides with the content you have created, the ebook, why you think specialized packaging, there needs a certain, or there's a need for a department for specialized packaging in certain companies.
And that, if there's anything that using today's technology, I'm amazed at how many companies. There are companies that just sell, and these are big billion-dollar companies that sell packaging. There's Crown Packaging and Orcora, Stephen Gould, I mentioned, they're still around. Some of these places do $2, $3, $4 billion a year in sales. Now, most of that is bubble wrap, banding, maybe some stretch wrap machinery, whatever. I think there's two, when somebody asks me, I don't care whether it's, at a family get together or whether it's a banker or whoever asks me what I do, we design and sell specialty packaging. Yes, we sell to the end user, the Ciscos of the world, Redmond Minerals, Corning Glass. But I think there's a massive untapped opportunity to partner with these big packaging wholesale companies that don't have a department or anybody there that understands specialized packaging. Let me try to run with this. And I love talking about this because it allows me to get clearer and clearer and clearer. So let's just say hypothetically, Kiana, let's just say you run the division of there's a company called Veritiv. Veritiv's another big conglomerate out there in the packaging space. And they sell everything they're like a U-line. They sell everything, even cutlery and paper plates and paper towels, whatever. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Now, you're the manager for that local Veritiv, and you and I have met, and it's like, well, do you sell, Kiana, does your department sell specialized packaging? Your first question is, what do you mean specialized packaging? What kind of specialized packaging? Because that's such a broad, it could be anything, right? And then I take it a step further and say, okay, Kiana, give me an idea of the types of customers that you sell. Are you selling into food manufacturers, or are you selling into, seafood, fisheries, or are you selling into frozen food, depending on whatever that is? All of those, whatever the industry is, that company uses specialized packaging. Look, the Amazons of the world, that's a brown box. That's not specialized packaging. What I'm talking about is part of the dance with a Veritiv in this particular case is to be able to say, if you're currently selling into, let's just say, XYZ fish market, and they're a fresh fish market that brings in the daily catch, flash freezes that, and then exports it to some big seafood place, okay? The question I always have is, where is their pain point, like I mentioned before? And I guarantee you that particular company has specialized packaging needs. You may not be selling them, Kiana. You're probably selling them at Veritiv, their pallets and their stretch wrap. And it's a good little account. They pay their bills. That's fine. But you see this massive amount of heavy duty bags that they flash freeze these fish in. And they sell millions of them. You see them go, and you're like, what are these? That's specialized packaging.
Yeah,
where do you get that? And so part of the challenges in those situations is where you go, what do you even call that? And again, this is where it takes that courage to be able to, I know it sounds cheesy, but there's still a lot of people that don't even have the courage to go, hey, Sam, what do you call that bag? What is that again? Oh, that's a vacuum bag that we use. It's a real heavy duty bag that we pull a vacuum on to keep the air and the, to preserve the fish and keep it fresher for longer. Oh, yeah. Okay. So I call those fish bags? No. They're vacuum bags used. And we get them from this place, but they're a pain in the neck and we never get them on time. Now the light bulb's going off for that Veritiv sales rep, for example, saying,
right.
Oh, hold on one second. You're having, now bring it full circle. If you had a department like us, that's a natural bolt on to your company. And you go, well, I'm going to call Marinac, who runs the specialty packaging department, and he can tell us what that is. And not only can tell us what it is, but where to get it, who the factories are that do it, what are the best ones to work with, who can run small volume, who can run massive volume. This suddenly has taken that sales rep into a new industry for that company that maybe that leads to a brand new chunk of change, not just for that rep, but for that company. Because oftentimes, if that rep finds out that that company in the fresh fish market has problems getting those vacuum bags, most likely the next question would be, do other people in the industry have this problem? Oh, yeah, the entire industry. They're so backed up, we can't even get these bags. Suddenly, you have something to bring up, not just to your local, but how many fisheries are out there? How many other places could you sell? Or, how, so this is where it kind of cascades. And we're just literally scratching the surface of being able to kind of, so in a nutshell, that's just one example. And then being able to imagine this, and I'll try to land this plane because I could talk to you forever. But let's just say hypothetically, we find these vacuum bags and we also find that it's now then our ability to go and find a supplier, whether that's in Taiwan or Vietnam or Brazil or wherever it may be. Let's just say that you are, or the customer, your customer, Veritiv's customer, is interested in saying, yeah, but I heard this material is not good for the environment, and we need something that's going to be better, more sustainable. Well, ironically, our factory in Brazil uses something that uses 40% less material with the same results, and they don't have a sales team here in the U.S. Now, suddenly, you see where I'm going? So suddenly, I've connected the dots of a major distributor of packaging. We've identified, hypothetically, a new type of business that they could sell directly as a customer. We've also identified an industry that's having problems, and this happens right now. It's happening all over. And then you've also brought it full circle where you see the bigger global picture where there's a sustainable, eco-friendly type of story that you could sell. I find that fascinating to me. I know it's goofy for me, but I find it fascinating. And I also find it perfect to get out there and share with companies who want to build their business. And why I'm so passionate about this, Kiana, is these Veritivs and Crown Packaging and all these big companies, they are really, really slow right now. Their business is very slow. And you would think that they'd be knocking on my door looking for it, but it's anything but. They are, and part of the challenge is we've got this bravado of people that don't want to tell anybody their problems. But God forbid I tell Kiana that I've got a problem getting these vacuum bags. I'd look silly. I'd look like no, it's just the opposite. I mean, I think being vulnerable is one of those things that a lot of, I know men feel really strange about it, but something about saying, look, I need help isn't necessarily a sign of weakness. It actually is a sign of strength. And be able to say, I need help, and here's the reason why, can you help me? I find that as the fastest way to get something done. I find that as the fastest way to find answers, and because people naturally want to help. If you came to me and say, hey, I need a favor, okay, what is it? Or vice versa, naturally we want to help that person. And I'm amazed at how many people here in the States are like, nope, not going to say anything, not going to say anything. And I just like, no. I don't know where I was going with that, but I mean, it's just, it's
true.
Yeah.
It's true. I feel like it kind of coincides with an ego thing because they have this company, this persona they have to uphold. And it, like you said, there's just that lack.
And I'd be, and you know what, to be honest with you, I'd be okay if they had that bravado or persona, if business was good and they could be cocky like that. But business is terrible. So I say to myself, what are you posturing for? You look like an idiot. You know what I mean? Don't do that. This is the time to ask for help. So it's just this like, holy moly, this isn't rocket science here, but it's just like, oh my goodness, there's such an opportunity and there's so much to this that, man, drives me nuts, but a huge opportunity.
No, and I truly believe that as well. A huge opportunity, because just talking to you, I feel like I've learned so much already. I know we've talked before, but each time I talk to you, I learn different things.
I appreciate it.
And when you break it down in the most simplest terms. And I feel like I understand it, but it makes me want to know more because I know there is more.
Thank you.
And when you say having a specialized packaging department, it totally makes sense.
Right.
For whatever company.
Right.
We all use packaging. Although it's the most basic and most simplest thing, it's actually not.
Right.
It's very intricate, like you said.
Correct.
There's so many different things a lot of people don't know. They may be spending too much money on this sort of packaging. Like you said, they're not getting it in time. The fact that you're able to connect the dots is what everyone should know. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get that out
that right. We're trying to slowly get it out there.
Everything, David Marinek, when it comes back to the very beginning of what we were talking about, this is who you are.